At a high level, what does your company do?
We are a full-on instructional design company. We do the strategy, we do the development, and then we do the deployment of e-learning. So Course Engine is our proprietary tool that we have developed that allows for us to really accelerate the development of that e-learning. The truth is, it was designed to basically be e-learning development for everyone. So that way, no matter who it is, they have the ability to go ahead and to create e-learning at scale.
What types of interactive content can you create?
Anything, literally anything. It is, as I said, voiceover, PowerPoint, interactions, everything from drag and drops to timelines to multiple choice or multiple select.
On your experience, what are some hard truths about e-learning?
A lot of people think that it's just easy. The truth is that it takes a lot of time to be able to be really thoughtful about what exactly you want to be able to present. There's a lot of strategy involved and a lot of pre-planning that needs to go.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Dan Streeter. He's the CEO of Mission Fuel AI. Welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Thank you so much, Luke. It's great to see you.
Awesome. So at a high level, what does your company do?
We are a full-on instructional design company. Effectively, we do the strategy, we do the development of e-learning, and then we do the deployment of e-learning on learning management systems. So essentially, people come to us and they want to build out, whether it's an instructor-led training or they want to go ahead and build e-learning, which is really what we're known for. Then they come to us to be able to do the strategy development deployment.
Awesome. And what is a Course Engine?
So Course Engine is our proprietary tool that we have developed over the course of the last year and a half that allows for us to really accelerate the development of that e-learning. We used to say that, you can really have it two ways, right? You can have it fast, good, or cheap, and those are really the three options. And you can get two of the three, but you can't get all three. Well, now all of a sudden we can do that. We can do it in an inexpensive, incredibly rapid way that really develops super high quality e-learning that people would expect out of tools like Captivate or Storyline 360 or a tool like iSpring. And now we're able to do that internally and be able to develop hours and hours and hours of content really in minimal time.
Awesome. And I know online you've said that this is not an LMS tool and this is not an authoring tool. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so it's actually more of an authoring tool, certainly is how we would describe it. And effectively what we do is we're going to take a piece of material or an idea, we're going to throw that into Course Engine. It will then go ahead and build out e-learning around it. So we're talking about voiceover, PowerPoint with interactions, e-learning like quizzes and drag and drops and all those sort of things, again, that you would expect in a high quality, the Storyline or Captivate type experience, and then go ahead and essentially be able to publish that in a fully SCORM-ready module that can be placed onto a learning management system. And so effectively, it is an authoring tool, certainly. And then what happens is that it then has the ability to produce 10 hours of e-learning at a go. Basically meaning that you can produce at 60 slides at a time, 60 seconds at a time, 10 modules at a time. So you multiply all that out, you come out with 10 hours of content that you can have all in one go. It's really kind of remarkable about how it goes. So 10 modules, 60 slides, 60 seconds per slide. It's crazy what's possible now to be able to build.
Wow. Interesting. And based upon your experience, what are some hard truths about e-learning?
Gosh, hard truths about e-learning. I think that a lot of people think that it's just easy, right? That you can just simply go in there and you do you put together like a basic video and then you go and you place it out there. Well, the truth is that it takes a lot of time to be able to be really thoughtful about what exactly you want to be able to present. There's a lot of strategy involved and a lot of pre-planning that needs to go into it before you go ahead and you actually do the development. The other part is that if you're doing it from scratch, the hard truth is it will take you 200 hours to create 1 hour of e-learning. And that is based on a study that was done way back in 2010. And so there's a study called from the Chapman Alliance, right? That basically came out and said 200 hours or 184 hours to build 1 hour of e-learning. Well, for the most part, for 13 years, we didn't do it differently. So that 184 hours stayed static over the course of those 13 years. But now, with artificial intelligence, we can dramatically accelerate the strategy process and dramatically accelerate the actual development process. So now, rather than 184 hours, we now have that down to less than 5 to be able to produce 1 hour of e-learning. So I would say that that the strategy side is one of the hard truths, and the other truth is, if you're doing it the old school way, you will absolutely be left behind.
In the past, what was causing such a huge bottleneck?
That's such a great question. Yeah, waiting. In fact, we did a quick study about this that in fact the 200 hours of time that was spent, most of it was not actually spent in production, the actual like manual active production. A lot of it was in the collaboration, for example, with the subject matter expert, which by the way is absolutely key. But the problem is that you would go to the subject matter expert and you would interview. Then after that, then you would go back and you would type it all up and you would figure out what are the learning objectives. Then from there, you'd go back to the subject matter expert and say, is this right? They'd say yes, or they'd say no, or whatever. Then there'd be this back and forth. Then I'm going to take that. Then I'm going to sit down. I'm going to write the script. Well, that takes time to write the script, right? So then I have to storyboard it. So then after I storyboard it, then I turn it back to you and you say, yes, that's right. And then we go back and forth and back and forth, back, as you can imagine, enormous amounts of time that go into that. And subject matter expert, it's not their job, right? They have a job. You're trying to be able to go to them to be able to figure out exactly what it is that they know so that way you can know it as well as they know it, which is great and awful all at the same time. Well, the truth is, with artificial intelligence, we now can probably guess 80, 90% of what you know, we probably can guess. And then from there, what we do is, of course, we're going to use standard operating procedures. We're going to use best context that we happen to have out there. And we're going to basically use artificial intelligence to go ahead and to basically then ask the right questions based on an initial interview that we might do with you of a couple of questions. But truthfully, we can go ahead and we can build the learning objectives. We can build the initial storyboard. We can actually build the full-on e-learning more inexpensively than we could actually begin to build the initial learning objectives. So consider if I can go ahead and build the actual final e-learning and then turn it over to you and say, is this right? Then they say, well, pretty close. And then we say, okay, well, what are the parts that you'd like to fix? That is a very different conversation than, okay, what is it that you want them to know? And because the problem is then you put this subject matter expert in the process of doing the actual building of content versus what we should be doing, which is we should use the tool that we have to go and to do the build, turn it over to the subject matter expert and say, is this right? And then giving them the opportunity to figure out what's missing, which is a very different conversation than going ahead and having them do the actual build.
How did you first get into instructional design?
That's such a great question. So I'm a former teacher turned school principal, turned entrepreneur. And so back in 2013, I created my very first company called Impart that was designed to be able to take people's books and then turn them into seminars that would be delivered in hotel rooms. And so, of course, I hadn't even really had e-learning on my radar back then. And e-learning had just started to kind of become a thing. I didn't even think anything about it. And then one day I got a call from an association out of Washington, D.C. that said, do you build e-learning? And I said, yes, we do. I had no idea what we were doing. And at the same time, through a lot of blood, sweat, tears, we figured it out and we created a really beautiful set of e-learning. And it was an association. And I thought, gosh, you know what? This wasn't so bad. I bet we can figure out how to be able to do this for other associations. And then we fell into the association market. So fast forward that company was acquired. I worked internally as an entrepreneur for a period of about 3.5 years with a group called Blue Sky eLearn. And then when AI came out, I asked to start up another company. And so we were able to make an agreement. And I went ahead and started another instructional design company that was using artificial intelligence to accelerate the process of instructional design.
Why did you decide to start this company now?
So the primary reason was because I saw the opportunity is that when it came to artificial intelligence, and when I remember when I sat down and it was November of 2022, and all of a sudden I heard about this thing called ChatGPT, and I'm just curious, right? And so
Yeah.
I sat down, I opened up ChatGPT, and I typed in my first prompt, and I thought, uh-oh, there's a problem. And so I went ahead and I typed in, I was like, hey, can you give me learning objectives? And it did it. And I asked, can you give me a storyboard? And it did it. I said, can you script this? And it did it. And I thought, oh no, the whole world is over in terms of instructional design because those elements are the things that make us as instructional designers. And so then the next thing you know, I went ahead and I said, okay, well, can we basically then take that and then put it into Storyline or into a tool like Captivate? And now all of a sudden we were able to dramatically accelerate the process. At that stage, we were already using AI voiceover, but we really didn't have a tool that would put together the scripting and the voiceover and all those pieces. So now I looked at that and I said, okay, we need to be able to move on this very, very quickly. Well, the company I was with, they just weren't ready to be able to do that. And so we went ahead and we said, okay, I'm ready. and I've already done the entrepreneur thing in the past. I'm ready to be able to do the next thing. And so then we were able to, again, make that agreement. And then from there, we were able to get the process from 200 hours to develop with that 1 hour of e-learning, then down to 68, and now down to less than 5. And of course, that's the tool Course Engine that really has sort of turned the instructional design world to a degree on its head. So it's kind of a fun space to be.
Who's your target audience now?
Target audience is still primarily associations, is almost exclusively our clientele. And now we have ventured into the corporate space as well, especially when it comes to onboarding, is really kind of one of our primary areas, or sort of that corporate training item. So any standard operating procedure that we have, anything that we might want to be able to do in terms of an onboarding process, any of those sort of things are really what we're after. And so for us, really the hard part there is that the world needs us. Whether it's K-12, in fact, we're now in negotiation with a couple of universities. Whether it's K-12, universities, corporate, or associations, every one of them can use this course authoring tool that really allows for us to be able to accelerate e-learning in a way that no one ever thought imaginable, even just a year and a half ago.
Interesting. We touched on this a bit before, but where is all that time going? Why did it take so long before this?
Yeah, so most of it was in that back and forth, right? If we take a look at a lot of the time, 40% of the time is actually wasted in waiting, right? The waiting and the going back and forth between subject matter experts and those components. The other part of it is the production, which is really around the actual manual work. When you think
Mhm.
about the manual work of it, it's like having to program a button. And in tools like Storyline or Captivate or iSpring, you have to physically go in and you have to be able to design what we would call a trigger. So I go in there and I design a trigger, or I design a state, or I design. If you're an instructional designer, you know what all those things mean. But then it also says, well, I have to control the timeline as well. Well, I need this bullet to come in exactly when they say this word. So you can imagine that all of a sudden, all the time that it takes to be able to do that construct of bullet to word, and so on. Well, we figured that out. Then the other part is that you have to be able to figure out, like, okay, what's the question that I'm going to ask that's really going to assess this item in the right way? So then I got to sit down and I have to write out the question. Then I turn it over to a subject matter expert and I'm like, is this right? And you're like, nah, that sort of missed the context, right? Well, but AI doesn't miss the context. And so now what I can do is I can build out all the questions. I can build out the multiple choice and the drag and drops and all those sort of things. I can have it already programmed, and I can basically go from zero to finished in, well, short amount of time. So I can do it, basically have a viewable module in less than an hour, and I can go ahead and have a finished module, including the subject matter expert reviewing it, in less than 5.
In the past, you've said that this is not a people problem, it's
Yeah,
a production problem.
that's right.
And what do you actually mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is that the model itself is what's broken. So that going back and forth, that iterative, like continuing to be able to go back and forth, it takes so much time to be able to do. That's the process that we have that's broken. The people want to be able to do good work. There's no doubt about that. But the problem is that we end up spending so much time in the back and forth, which, by the way, there is real valid need for that back and forth. But the amount of it is really where the problem comes in. Is that in the past, the build, we would use this, whether you use this model called ADDIE or you use the model called SAM, if you're an instructional designer, you'll know what those are. They require you to basically then go ahead and essentially do this: analyze and then design and then develop. And it's the iterative process makes it very difficult just over the course of time to be able to do. That's the process that's broken. Addie and Sam are not built for the new model that we have around the use of artificial intelligence. There's this model, it's called the successive approximation method, which is developed by Allen Interactions, and they're wonderful, but they created this model called SAM, right? Great. They basically wanted to do a rapid prototype. And I'm saying, absolutely do that rapid prototype, but you don't have to spend quite so much time doing it. We can go ahead and get to the end of it and basically provide you a finished product that you can look at and say, is that right? And we can essentially do a lot of the strategy work and provide it to you in advance and say, is that right? And so you get the idea that we have the ability now to really sort of jump ahead as instructional designers and do the things that we're really, really, really good at, which is basically building that strategy. But we can do a lot of that work on our own, especially if we know what the basic end outcomes are that will advance the company or advance the organization or advance individuals' careers.
Okay, so what happens when someone first uploads their content into Course Engine?
Great question. So it applies, first off, a construct called Bloom's taxonomy. And again, as instructional designers, we look at the world typically through a series of lenses. One of them might be Bloom's taxonomy. Another one might be called Gagny's. Doesn't really matter. But basically what it's going to do is it's going to analyze those documents. It's going to pull it into what's called a vector store. That's really not all that important, but basically it's going to create a little library from it. Then what it's going to do is it's going to tear those items apart. Once it does that, it's going to create a series of topics. It's going to say, hey, here are the audiences that we think that this should go for. And it's going to essentially design as a basic course working title. And then it's going to figure out who the target audience is and so on. Then from there, you have the ability to adjust. And then you go ahead and it has the ability to basically pull out all of the learning objectives that go along with it. Pretty fun. So now all of a sudden I can tell it, hey, I only want higher order thinking skills, or I only want to be able to do remember and understand. I can tell it I want 10 modules, 5 modules, whatever, or it will decide for you that you want it to do. And then from there, it will go ahead and it will build out those learning objectives all together. So let's imagine that I wanted to focus on higher order thinking skills. Great. I'm going to ask it to basically only do scenario-based questions. Totally doable. Or I only want it to be able to do true false. Totally doable. So now all of a sudden it's going to go ahead and it's going to do the build. So I define the learning objectives, comes in and it basically names the modules, gives descriptions of those modules, gives descriptions of the course, and then it goes ahead and it does the actual publication of the physical course. Slides, voiceover, animations, and again, the interactions. You can publish directly to SCORM. So essentially, SCORM is the type of file that you upload to a learning management system, or you can publish it in a way that allows for you to basically then upload it to your favorite instructional design tool. So if you love Storyline, great. You can basically download it from our tool. You go ahead and then you can place it into Storyline. And we're really the only group that will allow for that. Everybody else wants you to publish in their tool. Well, I know as an instructional designer, I want the ability to be able to use my own stuff, right? And so whether that's Storyline or Captivate, whatever, this tool allows for it to basically be 90+% of the way done. I download it, I place it in Storyline, and I can go ahead and I can finish it. And it does translations too. Crazy that's possible. It's all translations, localized, the whole thing. It is an MP4 to SCORM feature. I mean, like, it's crazy good.
How do you turn the raw content into these organized materials?
So that is where the intelligence of instructional design comes in. Remember, this was trained on it by an instructional designer, right? And trained by a series of instructional designers that we have that are really experts in their field. And we have a guy on our team that's written 4 books on instructional design, right? So we have that. And then we have, of course, great AI people as well who really understand how to be able to train models. And so a lot of it has been kind of the iterative process that has then said, okay, we want to be able to take into account Bloom's taxonomy, but we need to be able to supply it instructions to say what type of e-learning do we want it to be in terms of, higher order thinking skills, lesser order things, whatever those are. And then I think that the most important part, though, it was built by instructional designers for either instructional designers and also for lay people who don't have that background. When we first started Mission Fuel, the goal was actually to be able to provide AI for everyone, right? That was sort of our tagline, was AI for everyone. The truth is, it was designed to basically be AI e-learning, right? AI e-learning development for everyone. So that way, no matter who it is, they have the ability to go ahead and to create e-learning at scale.
How do you make sure that the training is good training?
See, now that's where, of course, you have to have the subject matter expert involved, right?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about brain surgery, but they do. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm basically going to go ahead and build the e-learning and then allow for the subject matter expert to say, yep, that's it, right? So this is what's really fascinating about where we are in this e-learning space. If you talk to any instructional designer out there, there's one missing piece of that ADDIE model that we always used to say that we really wanted to get to, but we never could, which was evaluation. So consider just for a second that we go out there and we build all of these hours of e-learning, but we actually don't know if it works. And that's what's crazy about instructional design and frankly, teaching in general. We go ahead and we teach in the classroom and then we walk away from it, or we go and we provide a test and we're like, oh, well, that one's over. And then we go on to the next, right? We don't really know what works in most schools. Now, there are studies out there and there are people who are trying to be able to do that work and all that sort of stuff. I totally agree with that. But when it comes especially to online learning, we rarely ever know whether, in fact, the thing that we do is actually working. And that's one of the most exciting things about what's happening right now in this revolution of e-learning that's going on, is that it has now allowed for us to be able to get to this evaluative stage, to be able to determine, well, does this actually work? Does it actually physically change behavior? And I'm betting that over the course of the next few years, we're going to find out what works and what doesn't, and we're going to capitalize on that because that's where agentic AI will allow for us to be able to figure out like that worked, let's do more of that. And that didn't work, let's do less of that. And our learning will get better and better and better over time. In fact, there are some people who say that we'll switch from being basically learning designers or instructional designers to being performance analysts, right? Or to be performance engineers, because it will allow for us to finally get to that final stage of, does it work? And we'll be able to build agents to help us to be able to then iterate on that learning. Imagine for a second, you have Course Engine, right? You have this beautiful e-learning that ends up getting created. We find out what works and what doesn't. It automatically informs Course Engine and all by itself. It goes ahead and it creates the next set of e-learning for a human to review and say, yep, that's better. And then you go ahead and you publish it. Crazy to think, but that's totally possible. And we're not there yet. And I would say no one is there yet, by the way. But that's where we're going for sure.
What types of interactive content can you create?
Well, now with vibe coding, anything, literally anything. I would say that in the context of Course Engine right now, it is, as I said, voiceover, PowerPoint, interactions, everything from drag and drops to timelines to multiple choice or multiple select or any of those sort of standards that you would see out there in a tool like a Storyline 360 or Captivate. But I think what's now different is that in order to be able to make use of true scenario-based learning, like that's done in a web object and those sort of things, it's tricky to be able to do in the context of a Storyline 360 and so on. It's not really built for that. You have to go out there into another tool and then go ahead and download it and try to place it, and it ends up kind of getting all wonky and all that. What we're out to be able to do, though, is to actually then include that as a part of the package that we're building. And so in the context of voice over PowerPoint interactions, you also have the ability to go into build a web object in the construct of Course Engine. So you can imagine that now all of a sudden we can build a scenario where I could build a voice agent that you and I have the ability to basically interact. Luke is on the other side as the avatar, and we have a customer experience based on that. How cool would that be? And then we have the ability to then really make it work to where either you can quiz me or something along those lines, but also that we have the ability to actually have a full-on interaction. And that's where we can see the change in behavior take place. Because now all of a sudden, you and I can have a very private conversation, right? And I can then change my behavior and practice that behavior over and over and over again until I get it exactly right. And without anybody else really knowing. That's pretty neat to be able to do. And then, of course, I can track that. I know that, we could spend time in there and I'm going to track all those conversations. But what's great about that is that then from those tracking of those conversations, I have 10 employees out of my 30 that haven't quite gotten it yet. Well, now I know that, and I'm able to go ahead and to iterate on that training just for those 10, which allows for truly personalized e-learning, which is sort of the next thing that's going to occur in this e-learning space.
How does the subject matter expert portal work?
Oh, so the subject matter expert part of it is where we go ahead and we send off the e-learning. They get a chance to review it. And then the subject matter expert then provides feedback, right? Just as you would on a PowerPoint or a Google Doc, same thing. So it's super straightforward. It's exactly what they're used to doing. And then they go ahead, they put in their comments, instructional designer gets it, and then they go ahead and then they make the fixes to it. So the subject matter expert is never trying to program the actual tool. The tool is basically the instructional designer is essentially going to continue to be able to do it. Now, could a subject matter expert do it? Sure, they could. But the hope is, of course, that the instructional designer would be the one in there doing that, generally speaking.
Are people losing real skills because they're relying too much on AI?
It's a different set of skills, right? So consider this subject matter expert. A skill is for them to then translate the things that they know, put them down into a PowerPoint that then can go ahead and be produced into a series of e-learnings, right? That's a skill that we happen to have. But the new skill is here's subject matter expert, find what's missing. That's a totally different set of skills. So now all of a sudden, it's not that the subject matter expert has lost a skill. They've actually maybe gained a skill, and maybe they need to be able to be trained on how to be able to actually use that new skill. Because we're asking them to do something vastly different than what they've ever done in the past. Because in the past, it's always been like, hey, subject matter expert, develop a webinar for me, go deliver it. Then I'm going to try to turn that into e-learning, right? We're not going to do that anymore. Instead, let's produce it, figure out what's missing. That is a brand new skill. And that's kind of what I mean by this switch or this shift that will occur. Because the people who have that ability will be the brand new subject matter experts moving forward, for sure. We'll be able to figure out what new evidence needs to be included in that learning. They'll have to figure out, what essentially what's missing, what needs to be included. That's the sort of thing that great subject matter experts will be able to do, and they'll be able to do it at scale.
I read online that there was an MIT study that found that there's a 47% collapse in people remembering what they wrote when they use ChatGPT.
Yeah,
What's your take on that?
you're exactly right. And the thing is that you hit the key word on the head, which is remember. The truth is that when we take a look at something like Bloom's taxonomy, remember, we now, when the internet came about, we flipped Bloom's taxonomy on its head. It used to be remember and understand, used to be the foundation of the pyramid of Bloom's taxonomy. So we'd start with remember and understand were the foundation. If you could do that, then you could analyze, evaluate, and apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So basically, that's the pyramid, right? Well, now all of a sudden we can say, well, gosh, we don't have to really remember anything because we have the internet. So we went ahead and we flipped the pyramid upside down. And we're going to say, we're going to take a very tiny bit of information. And the head of the pyramid is that bottom, the remembering, right? And then a little bit bigger is understand. And then a little bit bigger is apply. A little bigger is analyze, evaluate, right? And then at the very, very top is where we want to spend most of our time is in creation. Now, consider this just for a minute. So if we go ahead and we say, that was the old school internet. Now let's think about Bloom's taxonomy in the construct of AI. Now all of a sudden, I don't have to remember even less, or I have to remember even less things. And I have to not necessarily, I do need to understand, there's no doubt about that. But consider where I spend most of my time. Most of my time is spent in evaluating and creating, analyzing, right? Those are the sort of things that I'm spending the vast majority of my time on now. I have no doubt that we've got that 47% of it you can't remember, right? There's been this decline of 47%. I have no doubt about that. Does that mean that people are dumber? No. What it means is that people are actually spending time on the thing that they were meant to do, which is create. And so, granted, I can't remember what I wrote yesterday, right? And I sat down and I might even typed it out, and I don't necessarily remember what that is, and I'm okay with that. And I think that if we can create human beings that have or help human beings really figure out how to be able to focus on those higher order thinking skills, apply, analyze, evaluate, create, we have a much greater society rather than trying to only focus in on those things about remembering and understanding. And I think that's where learning has had to have a fundamental shift. It began 25 years ago when the internet was created. And now today, it is absolutely essential that we have that skill set of evaluating and creating. And if you don't have that skill set, I think it's problematic. I think that eventually you will be left behind because those people who have that skill of evaluation and creation, they are truly curious. Most people that just want to remember and understand, that's awesome. But think about the job that will be available. There won't be them. Because the desire, the need to go ahead and to basically do those rote remembering and understanding jobs, they'll be replaced. There's almost no doubt about that.
How are you using AI inside Course Engine?
So AI, we have a series of production tools that allow for us to be able to develop content from Course Engine, and I think that whether it's Claude or whether it's ChatGPT, all of those tools help us to be able to generate the content, and even outside tools like Eleven Labs or OpenAI, or I'm sorry, or Google Voice and those sort of things that we have in the tool. But I think what's even cooler about what we're doing now is that we have this outstanding tool that we've got. But what we're doing next is basically now automating many of the business processes that we have. So we're taking a look at sales and we're basically saying, what is it in sales that we can either automate or accelerate, and how can we do that? Then we take a look at our actual process, and we say, okay, what can we automate and accelerate? And then we look at our actual production, our actual product team. We say, what can we automate or accelerate? So what's crazy about that now is that we're using AI not just in Course Engine itself, but across the entire business structure as well. So when I think about like where we are right now, we've produced somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 150 hours of content over the course of the last couple of months. That we couldn't have done that in years. And yet alone now we've done it in just a couple of months, which is amazing. So we've got this great tool. Now what we have to be able to figure out is how do we then nail down those business processes so we can actually go ahead and get to our mission. And if we can figure out how to be able to make that occur, man, oh man, we've got something. And I think that we have truly the most important mission on the planet right now.
Where does AI still struggle in your pipeline?
I don't think it does. I think we do. I think it is our ability to be able to use it and understand what's possible, and as we begin to use it, expanding our willingness to be able to ask the question of what can you do. I think that's part of it. I think it's part of the human experience that we struggle in making sure that we're asking the right question, because almost always when I've asked the question, it's never once told me you can't do that. Right? I mean, always there is a way to be able to get something done. It is our ability to be able to ask the questions that will then allow for AI to be able to work well. Um, in terms of the actual tools themselves, I think it is the fine tuning of the tool. It gets us 80% of the way there. Then we have to go ahead and turn it over to an expert to be able to finish, just as we would do in terms of the building of e-learning. It's the same thing in terms of the building of Course Engine, right? I basically have an idea. I'm able to vibe code that idea, and I'm like, hey, Ian, our CTO, I'm like, hey, Ian, will you go ahead and will you take a look at this? And then he's like, oh yeah, you got that 80% of the way there. We can finish that. And then the next thing you know, he then takes my idea. Remember, same notion as, you basically build it and then you turn it over to a subject matter expert to complete. Same thing that we can go ahead and we can build from. So the notion is that AI, I don't think is the limit. I think that we are the limit right now. That we just need to be able to figure out how to be able to ask the right questions to make it happen.
How do you prevent AI from generating shallow content?
So most of that again is first off in the tool itself. Part of it is what we feed into the tool. So for example, if I'm going to take a deep research on an item, that
Mm.
will really help me to be able to figure out like what should be built. The other part of it is that many times it's like the garbage in, garbage out, right? That we can end up with. But really, for the most part, if you allow for it to go out to the interwebs and find the actual material that you're after, and basically ask that to be able to supplant the overall material, you're not going to end up with a bad product generally. A lot of times where the struggle is that if you don't have an end goal in mind, then you get exactly what you what you got, right? And so it's just like Alice in Wonderland, right? If you're walking along the path and you're like, yeah, you don't know where you're going, well, then you're absolutely going to get there. It's the same thing. That's why the strategy becomes so important, that when you go ahead and you say, look, I want somebody to be able to remember is a very, very different skill than analyze or to evaluate. And I want to make sure what actually is the skill that I want them to be able to have. And those are the sort of things that determine what does the content look like? What does the assessments look like that then back that piece of learning that you actually want them to get to. So the struggle is typically the user not going ahead and figuring out what actually is it that I want them to be able to do. And again, that's where talking to the subject matter expert is critical. We want them to identify, or do we want them to evaluate, or do we want them to create? Because we don't want people necessarily creating policy, but we do want them to understand the policy. We do want them to be able to apply the policy. Those are two different skills, and we want to make sure that we actually are able to then test on those skills and then figure out whether or not they actually applied them in the real workplace.
What would you never let AI automate fully?
Oh wow, the SME review at this stage for sure. I think is going to be one of the most important pieces. Is that the subject matter expert has got to be involved. We're dealing with some very high stakes materials at times, right? Medical items, legal items that we've got to go ahead and build out. So those items have got to be reviewed by subject matter experts along the way. Even for us in the e-learning space, we're experts at what we do. And so, therefore, we're going to go ahead and we want to review material, of course, before it goes out as well, if it's about our topic. In the very same way, having those subject matter experts in there is absolutely the most critical component. But again, don't ask subject matter experts to create content, right? Ask them to be able to figure out what needs to, what needs to be added, what needs to be removed, versus asking them to go out there and create it.
What does corporate training get wrong about how most people learn?
Oh my goodness. They say these sort of things. I taught it, they didn't learn it. It's the very same thing that we do in schools as well, whether public, private, whatever. We say things like, I taught it, they didn't get it.
Mm.
No, that's the biggest thing that the corporate training, it just education in general gets wrong. The truth is the onus for learning is on the instructor. And because my job is that you change behavior in the way that it is that I'm after to be able to create. So if I want them to be able to follow a standard operating procedure, I taught it and they didn't do it. Who does that really fall on? That's what I mean by this evaluative stage to be able to figure out like what worked and what didn't. So, for example, we go ahead and we say, okay, I've got, I have them 5% of the way there, right? So all of a sudden, I teach them about the standard operating procedure, and they get it 5% is what they got. Okay, well, we got it 95% wrong. We throw up our hands and say, oh, it just didn't work, right? But the truth is that we got 5% of this. That's awesome. Okay, so now all of a sudden it's like, well, what did we do there that worked? And now all of a sudden we can iterate on that and say, okay, we're going to accentuate this thing of 5%. And so then all of a sudden we come over and we say, now all of a sudden we're at 15% because we made these small changes. We're onto something. And so then the next thing you know is that this is the second big lesson that's in this, is that learning is iterative. Learning is not a one-time event. It is something that we do over the course of time that we get better and better and better at. It isn't as if we go ahead and we teach them some item and then the next thing you know, there's this 180-degree flip. That is not the way that people work. People work in iterative stages. We grow over the course of time. And I think that those are really the two kind of elements that I think that most corporate trainers miss. Number one is that I trained it, they didn't get it, doesn't work. And the second part is that training is, well, first off, being a teacher is a practice. Being a doctor is a practice. It's the same thing in education. It's a practice, which means that it's iterative and that we get better over time as instructors and we get better over time as students.
How should companies measure whether the content actually worked?
Great question. Behavior change. That's really the crux of what we do, is that our job is to be able to determine, I want people to follow standard operating procedure, or I want them to be able to do this certain thing that's going to allow for us to be able to be more efficient or be able to be more effective or whatever the thing is that I want them to do. And I'm basically going to predetermine this is the objective that I want them to do. I'm going to build an e-learning that's going to match, or build a learning generally that's going to match. Then after that, I'm going to go ahead and deploy that e-learning. And maybe I go ahead and I only deploy it to a small subsection. Maybe I deploy it to the whole company. I don't know. And so I go ahead and I put that out there, right? And then the next thing you know, down here, I'm going to evaluate whether or not it's going to work. And the evaluation isn't completions. That's where most people get stuck. They're like, well, they completed it. I guess they just didn't implement it. The truth is, though, is that if we go and we take a look at those completions, what's the next thing that happens? The next thing that has to happen is, did they actually do the behavior? Because a lot of times they'll go ahead and they'll complete the e-learning, but if we don't design it well, they just click through. And then the next thing you know, they just keep doing what they were doing. The truth is that we want them to follow that standard operating procedure. So
Mhm.
that means that, gosh, you know what? I developed this e-learning, and then we've got the standard operating procedure. I want to find out: is it 5%? Is it 20%? Do they only follow part of it? Do they follow all of it? What exactly is it that we should do? So from the corporate standpoint and from education generally, whether it's K-12 university or whatever, it is getting to that end point, right? That evaluation. That is the only way that we're actually going to go ahead and make these e-learning improvements along the way. And I'll be honest with you, most people in terms of education, we will be having the same fight 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. We will still be in the same boat because of the fact that you're basically trying to be able to get education to make this massive shift in this incredibly short period of time. There are pockets where that's not occurring, where we are not having that fight, where people are like, yeah, evaluation is it. But if you look at the vast majority of public education, private education, universities, not happening. That conversation is not there yet. Eventually it will. I hope it will.
How do you make sure that content is more engaging?
So most of that happens to do. I have a friend, Thomas Toth, who's an amazing instructional designer. He calls them lean-in moments, right? And so basically, this notion is that I have to be able to do something potentially on screen. So number one, I think, is going to be important is that you actually set up the structure to where they have to do that. That's going to be one. Two thing is that you have to be able to kind of force them to think a little bit because you want to get to that end outcome. Is it remember? Is it understand? Is it analyze, evaluate? And then you put it in their context. That's going to be super important. So a basic question that we might ask could be simple, true, false. But the truth is that we might then ask for them to go into analyze the situation. Based on that, if they happen to get it right or they get it wrong, they might get a different scenario, or they might get an additional scenario, or they might end up getting sort of a reiteration of that e-learning. Or we can go ahead and ask them to be able to apply a certain situation, or you get the idea. But it all really comes down to forcing the learner to be able to actually take the construct of what we want, making sure that we really define what we want. That's super important. Then taking that construct and then going ahead and actually physically doing it, applying, evaluating, analyzing, whatever that notion is, and then giving them the space to be able to do it. I think that those are some of the most important things for us to do, and then setting up the structure that goes along with it as well. As instructional designers, I think one of the things that we do to our detriment, to be honest, is we spend hundreds of hours building out these beautiful e-learning experiences when truthfully, they don't matter a lick when it comes to the actual outcome that we wanted them to do. We say, it's beautiful. And I say, yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. Did it actually change behavior? And the truth is, most oftentimes, no. Most oftentimes, it didn't have any greater impact than a simple drag and drop activity.
Mm.
But they spent hundreds of hours versus what we did in 20 minutes.
Yeah. Tell me more about the ISSA case study.
Oh, so ISSA is the International Sanitary Supply Association. They're a wonderful group, and they really want to revolutionize the way that education is delivered in the cleaning space. So they do everything. They have membership, everyone from the chemicals that are produced in cleaning to building service contractors who are out there and doing that, and to robotics and literally everybody in between. They're one of the largest associations in the world doing some just remarkable work. Well, they came to us basically saying, we want to overhaul our education. And so we sat down and we created a plan that included 65 hours of e-learning content, plus an additional 10 instructor-led trainings, plus an additional what they call EVS, basically hospital training cleaning, plus the addition of 3 education apps that we would build. So consider that for just a minute. That is an enormous amount of work. That likely would have taken us years to be able to develop. Well, we're basically going to be at that 65-hour mark at 120 days. That's unreal.
Wow.
We will have at least half of those instructor-led trainings done by June 1st, which again is what we're talking 120 days. I mean, consider that for just a minute. That used to take years to do. And now we have the ability to do it, including the subject matter experts, verification, in days. And that is what's different. Our speed to market is way different. The opportunities are so different because the thing is that AI has now created this necessity of speed. It used to be that industries would move relatively slow. It was okay to wait a year or 2 years on e-learning. You can't do that anymore because if you do, by the time that e-learning gets out, the industry has already shifted. It's over. And so the opportunity that was created with that e-learning that took 2 years to be able to develop, no joke, 2 years to develop, well, the opportunity is past. And so everybody who wanted that piece of e-learning, it's out. And so the point is, I think that that speed to market is so much better for ISSA. I think that the quality of what's produced is so much better. It's templatized. It all looks the same. It all sounds the same. It gives the ability for us now to create learning at scale in a way that we could have never even imagined just a bit ago. And it will create. Potentially, millions of dollars of opportunity because of the business model that's been created around it, because of the physical content. And with that, we are changing the world for those people who go out there and are literally on the front lines every day. That all of the cleaners, whether it's custodian in a school or whether it's a janitor at a building service contractor or anybody in between, it is truly changing the lives of millions of workers across the United States and frankly the world.
Where do customers see the ROI the fastest?
So most of the time, they see the ROI the fastest in, well, first off, in terms of the speed of production, certainly the speed to market. The second part is that when it comes to the actual business model of learning is really in the e-learning sale of it as well. Most of the time, that's either going to be an individual content sale or it's going to go ahead and be a team or an enterprise scale learning as well. I think about one of our clients. They're the North Carolina Home Builder Association. They are wonderful. And at the same time, they struggled really to get their e-learning kind of off the ground, right? Well, we were basically able to get them from a really an okay space when it came to e-learning, but they were primarily delivering webinars and all that sort of stuff. And then we basically came in, we were able to develop. Oh gosh, now we're like 20 hours of e-learning, and they've quadrupled their revenue from the time that we started. And so from our perspective, time to market is absolutely there. The ease on their staff is so much better because they're not developing the content. The ease on their subject matter experts is so much better because we basically hand them over a finished product that they can say yay or nay to, and they supply small edits, and we supply it to the state, and they approve it. And I think that the other net benefit is that first the revenue definitely, but also the impact on their industry as well, and that those are the things that I think are so critical for us as a association builders. Right? We can have it fast, we can have it really good, we're gonna have it inexpensive, and now all of a sudden we can have all three of those things that allow for the exponential ROI that most associations could never get to in the past.
What types of associations feel the most pain?
Good question. I would say that most of them are going to be those smaller type associations, typically in that middle to lower sort of realm of the associations. The bigger ones, they typically are going to have their own instructional design teams. They have these large balance sheets of millions and millions of dollars in the bank that they're just simply sitting on. Those sort of groups, they're generally speaking not too worried about the instructional design process, that sort of thing. But the middle ground and the smaller ones, they absolutely need this because they've got one person who's likely responsible for membership and education and so on. And so our job is to then come in and help them and really figure out how best to be able to supplement them. So for example, what we can do is we're a full-on instructional design company. If you want to use Course Engine, great, do it. You can do it yourself, we can do it with you, or we can do it for you. And so essentially, do it yourself, just hop into Course Engine and build it all on your own. You can do with you, you get it 80% of the way there, turn it over to us, we polish it up. Or we can do it for you. Basically, you just turn over to the material to us, and then we complete it for you. Any of those things are possible.
So you talked about these three service offerings.
Mhm.
Why did you decide to create these three service offerings instead of just creating a software?
Good question, because I think this is the direction that we will go. So a lot of people have said that SaaS is dead, right? That's sort of the new thing is that if you go out there and you take a look at software as a service, most of the time you're just going to be able to build that on your own. That's true. I think that if you're relatively good at vibe coding in the next, oh gosh, 2 to 3 years, you'll be able to type it up and have an app, right? Totally going to be possible to do. But what you won't be able to do is to support that service that needs to go along with that as well. And so we are first to market with this tool, voice over PowerPoint interactions, first in the world to be able to do it. But what we firmly believe is that really two things. One, we have to meet the client where they are. Most of the time, they're going to want us to do it for them because that's really been the traditional model up to this stage. But very shortly, a year, 2 years, those same people that want it done for them now will go ahead and say to us, look, you know what? Let us get it close and then you guys finish it for us. And then another year or so, they're just simply going to say, we're just going to build it. Right. And so then the next thing you know, they will just typically just enter into the tool and use the tool on its own. Point being is that as instructional designers, our job is to be able to meet people where they are. That's what we talk about in education all the time. Why can't we do that too? And so when I think about almost all SaaS based products, most of them, most of them are going to have a service based component that's going to attach to it. They're going to be forced to, and they will follow a similar model to what we've done with you, or do it yourself, done with you, done for you. I think that we will see that more and more and more, whether it's a marketing tool or whether it's the other SaaS tools that are out there, but instructional design especially, we will see this happen.
How do customers discover that they even have this problem in the first place?
Well, most of the time, well, an association, it's in their mission. So typically, associations do three primary things: is that they advocate, right? So they do things like policy making and all that. They work with the federal government and the state government, so to basically advocate for an industry. That's one. The second thing that they do is they provide networking opportunities. They design things like conferences that people go to, right? So that's two. But the third thing in every single association's mission, not every, but very close to every single one, is education. And so
Mhm.
everybody knows they have the problem. Most people have just simply thrown up their hands and they say, well, we do conference education. That's where we do education, right? So once a year, everybody gets in a room and we do all these conference sessions. And then we say, well, we fulfilled the mission. And that's true. But the problem is that we have to be able to then supplant that education over the course of time. We have to be able to figure out how exactly do we then take those conference pieces and then turn them into e-learning that people can access at will, right? 24/7. That's the sort of thing that we want to be able to create. I think that education now has the opportunity to be democratized to where anybody in the planet should be able to get it at will. And that's kind of what we mean by taking those conferences and then turning them into e-learning. The association has got to remain relevant. The way that they will remain relevant is by creating content that aligns with the industry that nobody else can do. And they have all of the things they need. They have the subject matter experts, they have the distribution channels, and they have the credibility. And those are the things that nobody else on the planet has. The association should dominate their education space. And frankly, you want them to, because you want a doctor who's part of the American Heart Association or part of the Endocrinology Association, because you want that because they're getting the most state-of-the-art research that's out there. And from that, they're truly surrounded by subject matter experts, and they have an easy way to get it through learning management systems. So you want great subject matter experts who have the ability to go ahead and to basically make sure they're fully informed, so you're getting the best care. And that goes across the board, whether it's in horticulture or whether it's in truck driving. You want that very same thing. And there is literally an association for everything. So we want to make sure that we're supplying the best education possible for everybody out there. And the association is the by far the best place to get that.
When you're selling this, what objections do you get most often?
That's a good question. Most oftentimes, it's not really about price anymore. Most oftentimes, it is this thing, which is crazy to me, and it happens all the time, where they say, "Well, our subject matter experts are concerned that they won't have their voice in it, and that it's going to go too fast." Consider that for just a minute. That it'll go too fast. But I thought that's what we wanted when it comes to speed to market. I think that that's really one of the biggest objections is that people are still a little bit uncertain about AI, that it will go too fast and that they won't have their voice in there. And that those three things, frankly, they're not really real because of course the subject matter experts will be able to do it. And we can supply as much hand holding or as little hand holding as you want. But if they don't choose to go down this road of AI, you're talking about 4, 5, 10x the timeline to be able to get the very same work product, and frankly, better work product than they would get following that 10x the regular long-term instructional design process that we used to follow.
You previously said that we need to reskill a billion people.
Yeah,
What do you mean by that?
that is our mission. When we think about where we are right now in the world, is that 40% of the people on the planet will need to be reskilled as we go through this economic, truly the greatest economic revolution in the history of man because of artificial intelligence. And so consider this just for a minute, is that we go and we take a look at the agricultural age took tens of thousands of years, right? Industrial age took a few hundred years. Information age took a few dozen years. And now we're all of a sudden entering the AI age. We have gone from 0 to 700 million people on the planet using ChatGPT or another AI tool in a period of 3.5 years. Well, now all of a sudden we have this huge revolution where every single person, you included, especially with you and in your background, whether it's our camera guy or anybody else in between, everyone is going to need to have some sort of reskilling that's going to take place, regardless of what the job happens to be. And so if we know that, for example, 96% of a computer analyst job or a mathematician's job will likely be done by AI over the course of the next 5 years, what are you going to do? There has to be a shift in a job that's going to take place if most of those mathematical and computational functions are going to be done by AI. There's going to be a change that's going to happen. Or we face what Dario Amodei said, which is that we're looking at 50% unemployment of white collar workers. 50% unemployment. Well, we have to reskill those folks. Otherwise, we're going to end up with what he called 20% or more unemployment. We're talking about Great Depression numbers. This is the most urgent thing that we could possibly do. And I believe that instructional designers and where we are right now as educators is the most important thing that we could possibly be doing. Because where's that education going to come from? Now, I'm a former K-12 instructor, right? I taught high school. I'm a former elementary and middle school principal. So I know what that is. And I can tell you right now that K-12 is not fast enough. By the time that freshman graduates from college, it's over. The AI will have iterated 5, 6, 20 times by the time by the time that freshman gets out of college. I have right now one of my kids going to college right now, 21 years old, walks into a classroom and is forced to put his phone in the phone pocket at 21 years old. Right. So universities are not necessarily going to be there. So all of a sudden it's too slow for K-12 and university to be able to do it. So where exactly is that education going to come from? Boot camps? No, it's not going to happen, because the problem is that boot camps, there's just not enough of them and they're wildly expensive. So where's it going to come from? Well, almost always that education is going to come from associations, and it's going to come from corporations. Those are going to be the places where the most impact can come. And that's the reason why we've chosen to step into this space at this time, to be able to now all of a sudden allow for mass production of content that really allows for good, solid e-learning to be produced in a way that never could have been done before. So I believe that we have this incredible mission to be able to reskill 1 billion people on the planet over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. And it has to happen by the time we get to 2030. Otherwise, we could be looking at mass scale of unemployment. And I want to make sure that doesn't happen.
What skills are going to be the most important for people to learn in this information age?
Great question. Flexibility. That's going to be the next thing, right? This AI revolution is going to require us to be able to iterate and iterate and iterate, frankly, faster and faster and faster. Even a company like us, that we are truly on the cutting, and some would even say the bleeding edge of this technology. We have to be able to continue to iterate over the course of time. You think about things like graphic designers, right? Well, all of a sudden, Claude comes out with this tool called Designer that's unreal. And all of a sudden, right behind it, they come out with the new image generator from ChatGPT. Well, all of those jobs that those designers are doing now have to shift, because now I can design an image just as good as you can. And so now all of a sudden, what is that designer? What is their job going to be? Those jobs still exist. They just look different. And so now all of a sudden, maybe it's the do it yourself, done with you, done for you, right? Maybe you create your own app that you supply out to people, but maybe you allow for them to, you supply special pricing that allows for them to get it most of the way they want it. And then you go and take that design and put it into InDesign. And then you finish it. You get the idea that those jobs will still be there, but there has to be an iterative a change that needs to happen. And we as people have got to be willing to stand up and say, okay, this is happening. Whether I like it or not, it's happening. My job is to be able to be flexible enough to say, you know what, I want to be able to continue to contribute. I want to be able to continue to either A, have my own job or create my own. And the way that I'm going to do that is by being by iterating over and over and over again. And it's going to require that for us really for the foreseeable future.
Where do you think AI is being overhyped right now?
Overhyped. I think the notion that AI is going to take everybody's jobs is overhyped. Um, Eventually, maybe. But we're also talking about the possibility of 10, 15, 20 years from now that we're looking at those sort of changes that are going to occur. I do think that we're going to see a shift again in how things are done. For example, even in our company, we will have agents that are managed by people, right? And a lot of that job will occur. I think that from a production standpoint, we will see a dramatic amount of production, but no more people added, right, to the job market. So there'll be sort of this stagnancy that occurs potentially. But this dramatic notion that everybody's going to lose their jobs because they're going to be replaced by an agent, maybe. But the more likelihood is that we will iterate and we will actually create the greatest production boom in the history of the world will occur over the course of the next 15 years. Now, when we get to AGI, that's a better question, right? When we have robots who then have AGI, now all of a sudden we have a little different conversation because if we potentially have what Elon Musk would say, we have 10 billion robots, we have more robots than people on the planet. What does he say in the next 10 years or something like that? Now all of a sudden we have a very, very different conversation because now those jobs could potentially dig the hole to put the fence post in. Right now, all of a sudden, that function becomes a little bit different, and I think that generally speaking, if we're not, I wouldn't say not careful because that's not the right way to say it because it's going to happen no matter how we do it. But if we don't do it intelligently, then it could be kind of problematic. But capitalism and this notion of capitalism will win. We will produce more, we'll become better, and we'll become better as a society because of this new technology.
How did you get your first customers?
Gosh, that is a great question. So back in 2013, my very first customers came from my friends. And I happened to have an incredible group of people that were around me who were willing to make referrals for me when I had really uncertainty about how to start up a business for the very first time. The second time around, I kind of had a network, so I was pretty lucky. And so when Mission Fuel first came out 3.5 years ago, it was hard because a lot of people really questioned, "You're going in this AI direction. Is AI really a thing?" And of course, it's a thing. And it took some time to kind of get a client cycle who really believed in what we were doing. Now it's game on. There are so many people who understand kind of what we're doing and the benefits of what we're doing. Still, certainly skeptics, but a lot of it now is by word of mouth. A lot of it is I speak a fair amount. In fact, just this past week, I've done 3 keynotes, and of course, I'm here with you today. I'll deliver 3 more keynotes next week, and so a lot of it is spent on the road, traveling, speaking, doing those sort of pieces. And fortunately, I've been fairly lucky to be considered, quote, an expert in AI. I don't think that that's true. I think there are very, very few people that are truly experts in this because it is evolving so rapidly. It's not possible because if you wait even a few weeks, next thing you know, you're like, the world is flipped on its head again in a period of 3 weeks.
Wow. How has your positioning changed since getting those first few customers to now?
I'm so glad you asked this because this is something that we struggled with. And so when I first started Mission Fuel, I wanted to accentuate the AI, right? That was the thing that we did. And what we found was that people didn't want that, especially in the association world. They were freaked out by it. They were like, "What do you mean you're going to use AI?" And it led to all of these questions along the way. And so instead, what we say is we are an AI, we are an instructional design company. We just happen to use AI. Right. And so now all of a sudden, when we take a look at timelines and people look at our timelines, they're like, okay, how are you able to do that in 3 weeks when everybody else it's going to take us 3 months or 6 months or 9 months? Well, this is how we do it. And then we actually lay out the process for them. They're like, oh, I get it now. That's the difference. The other difference was the game changer for us was the do it yourself, done with you, done for you model. That has changed the game because it has opened up the market for us because it used to be, well, we don't want people necessarily to use Course Engine, right? We want to try to keep that internally. And that shift and allowing that model to be able to go out there, flat out, one of the best things that we have done.
I also saw online that you did do so much speaking. How important do you find the speaking to be to getting those customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for us, it's critical because it allows for me to be in front of an audience and it just spread the message about really what the mission is. Is that there's huge urgency around this. I think a lot of times we end up in this position where or we just sort of like, well, it's happening, right? And it's out there in the world. And yeah, I hear about it when it's on the news and whatever. But this makes it real. When I'm able to stand in front of you and make the social case for it first, and then not only do I do that, then I turn around and I actually show it to you. And I say, this is what AI is capable of. Can it do anything in your job to help you to be able to automate and accelerate? And all of a sudden, those that are curious, they're like, oh, I get it. So now all of a sudden they're like, okay, I can apply it here and I can apply it here and I can apply it here. Remember, that is reskilling. That's exactly what we've been talking about is behavior change. We want them to go out there and to use those tools to make their business lives, their social lives, their personal lives all better, right? So now all of a sudden we have to kind of help them along the way, ultimately with that behavior change. So for me, it's critical that number one, we're actually fulfilling the mission. Number two, the side benefit is the fact that we actually get more clients from it, and because I'm able to demonstrate the tool for them, and now I don't even have to do it. I like open up the Claude extension, it connects to Course Engine, and it produces the courses all by itself. It's just crazy. And then people are like, "You got to be kidding me! You produced an hour of e-learning, you didn't even touch it." Like exactly right.
What do you think e-learning is going to look like in 2030?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Okay, so here's where I think we will go. So when it comes to 2030, several things will occur. Now remember also, this is only 3.5 years away. So number one thing is we're going to get to that evaluative stage that I talked about before, right? So when it comes to the process of content production, there are really kind of two camps that are happening. One is content production. Like we're going to be able to produce content at scale. A lot of criticism around that right now, right? Is that people are like, oh, well, yeah, it's just the same old stuff that you're producing. But the problem is that there's this huge backlog of stuff that needs to be produced. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of content where people want to create. Okay, so that's going to be number one, is that we've got this content at scale problem that we are solving and other groups out there are trying to solve. We think we've solved it in a pretty unique way that the vast majority of people have, well, not vast majority, no one else on the planet has done. I think that that's going to be the number one thing, right? Content production. Second part, though, is going to be this little E at the end of the ADDIE, which is the, of course, evaluation. We're going to figure out how we're going to evaluate the material to figure out how we can iterate on it. That's going to be one of the first things that's going to happen is we're going to basically take that E, we're going to evaluate, we're going to come on over and redo that e-learning. And it's basically going to supply this iterative cycle, right? That's going to occur and it will begin to occur automatically. That is for certain what will happen a year, maybe a year and a half. It will at scale be in HR platforms and those sort of things 3, 4, 5 years. So we're probably talking by the time we get to 2030. That's going to be one part of it. Another part of it, though, that's super exciting is this personalized learning. So imagine that we've got that same evaluation, right? So the evaluation comes around and at scale changes the e-learning at scale. But let's imagine for a second that that same evaluation has the ability now to say, okay, oh, this is Bob. I know Bob. Bob has struggled with this item and he struggled with it in this way. I'm going to adjust the e-learning for him right off the bat. And I'm going to present something in a new way that allows for him to be able to get it. And not only will we be able to do that for Bob, but we'll be able to do it for Jill and anybody else that happens to be in the company. We can go ahead and we can then build the e-learning specifically for them. And that's what we mean by being truly performance engineers. Notice we're not building the content, right? We're having that content be built and then turned over to a subject matter expert to verify, and then it then personalizes directly for that person. So it is the iterative process of the build that will become sort of automated. And me as the instructional designer, now all of a sudden I become a performance engineer because I'm able to see, oh, Bob's got it. Jill's got it, Laura's got it. Well, this other person doesn't. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to now provide a next intervention. In K-12 schools, we used to call this RTI, response to intervention. I know they have a whole bunch of other words for it, but as an instructor, my job was to find out that that person sitting in the back left of the room, by the way, that was always me, sitting back in the back left of the room, that person, they're struggling with this item, right? And I need to be able to identify it. The problem is I got 30 of those kids. And if I'm in elementary, if I'm in high school, I got 150 of them. There's no way for me to know, but AI does. So AI can identify, oh, that person is struggling. And so therefore now we can go ahead and we can create an intervention specifically for them. And we can do it in time before there actually becomes a real problem. And I can do it at scale, never before possible. That does not remove the teacher from the classroom, but think about what it does do. Remember, we talked about remember, understand, evaluate, create. Now, all of a sudden, it allows for me as the teacher, I don't have to remember and understand that stuff because AI tells me, oh, person in the back left of the room is struggling with this item. Now, I can be creative, I can create a plan to actually be able to solve that problem. And that's the thing that AI allows for us to do, is that it relieves the brain space that lets us do the good things of the world and allows for us to evaluate and create in a way never imaginable before. And that's what makes this so exciting.
What is something that you believe about learning that most people don't see yet?
I think it is a fundamental truth about learning. Is that learning is about behavior change. I think that a lot of times we get stuck in this piece of that notion of I taught it, they didn't learn it. But the truth is that really we need to be able to create behavior change. Well, the way that you do that is by creating either repetitive experiences over and over and over again, or you make it emotional, right? So the equation is basically emotion plus behavior, or in this case, repetition equals learning. And so basically what we can do is you can imagine, for example, that you're chased by a dog. Have you ever been chased by a dog?
I don't think I have.
Okay, so have you ever like had your hand slammed in a car door?
Yes.
Okay, you remember that, right? So do you remember, like, does that bring you back to that memory?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're like going to walk out to your car, you're going to open up the car door, and you're like, I'm keeping my left hand away from there, right?
Yeah.
Because it changed your behavior. Fundamentally, your hand was slammed in that car door. It only took one time, but it's something that has stuck with you your entire life. Same thing about being chased by a dog, right? 6 years old, I walk up to a door, knock on the door, pit bull jumps through the screen door at me, right? Thankfully, didn't get me. And at the same time, I still right now can remember that incident. Vast majority of us can do that. Every screen door that I walk up to, I'm like, pit bull there, right? I'm 53 years old. That happened when I was 6, and it has stuck with me the entire time. The point being is that it fundamentally changes our behavior because of this crazy heightened emotional experience. Same thing with repetition. Did you play sports?
In middle school, I played some sports.
Awesome. What'd you play?
I did wrestling.
Wrestling. Awesome. So if we like wrestled, you likely would pull out a move that you did in middle school.
Probably.
Probably the reason for that is because of the repetition that happened in there. You repeated the motion over and over and over in the slide tackle or whatever it happens to be, right? The giant suplex. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like the big. Anyways, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Point is that whatever that move is, you learned that thing and you repeated it over and over and over again, even to the point where 20 years later, you still remember that thing that you did in middle school. So the point is that those shifted your behavior, highly emotional or behavior, right? Practiced, that actually equals the behavior change that we're after. That's the same thing that I think that most people don't know about learning, is that that's the fundamental equation. It is emotion plus experience equals learning. And I think that if we look at it in those perspectives, when we design e-learning, we can make it emotional, not frustrating, right? But just simply make it emotional to tie it together to their current job, tie it together to scenarios that they faced, tie it together to the thing that they value in terms of their overall job. So it doesn't just have to be compliance, it can actually be worthwhile and actually demonstrate behavior change.
Wow, very interesting. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Luke. It was great to see you. I really appreciate it.